You don't want to ruin your ceremony by picking the wrong shaman. So how do you spot a fake shaman and how do you recognize a master shaman? Also, what's the journey of becoming an ayahuasca shaman like? I share my path around that topic to one day share ayahuasca, so stick around till the end of the video. So let's start about how it's not done. And it's basically selling courses to become an ayahuasca shaman. There are places in the Amazon in Peru, wherever, where you can go there in 6 weeks, in 3 months, whatever time period, you become a certified ayahuasca shaman. And it's actually very dangerous because that's also where accidents can happen, because obviously you cannot gain that level of intimate knowledge around ayahuasca, the maturity to be able to manage such a powerful plant and ceremonies. So accidents can happen, then the facilitator will not be able to handle certain situations. So that's a very worrying trend. My mom is a yoga teacher and she told me the real business in yoga is not about teaching the class where you get $10 per hour, per participant, but about doing the yoga teacher training, because then you get for one person multiple thousands of dollars. So in a way it's similar with the ayahuasca, and it's very important to be careful around, around that topic when somebody says like, yeah, I've been to the Amazon and now I'm an ayahuasca shaman. Another one is people might in their ayahuasca ceremony hear a calling like, hey, you should be sharing ayahuasca and you're ready to share an ayahuasca and I want you to work with me. And it might be a calling for that individual to go on that path of apprenticeship, but it doesn't mean that that person is ready to share ayahuasca. It can even be that that person is actually hearing their own ego talk to them through the ayahuasca. And yeah, so don't fall for people who say like, hey, the ayahuasca told me that I'm ready to share ayahuasca and now I'm doing it, especially if it's less than 100 ceremonies deep into their journey. So what's very essential is that if going on that journey of becoming an ayahuasca shaman, that the person has a teacher, because it's a wisdom that has been guarded for generations, for centuries, even millennials. And it's, if you think about you going to the Amazon rainforest by yourself, the likelihood that you're going to get lost, that you might even die, is pretty high. But if you go with somebody who lives in the Amazon, he can show you like magnificent places and you're going to have an incredible time. Of course, like with a couple, maybe with some bumps down the road. And you can look at that metaphor for ayahuasca as well. So you need somebody who has been in that tradition for a long time, who's sharing ayahuasca, who can show you the ropes and guide you on that journey. So what you need to become an ayahuasca shaman is actually years of training and hundreds over hundreds of ayahuasca ceremonies. With that, I want to go a little bit into my story. When I started to be on this path of creating this ayahuasca retreat center, I also talked with Sergio, my teacher, like, hey, I want to learn more about ayahuasca. And he said, well, if you want to learn more about ayahuasca, you need to drink more ayahuasca. It's not something that you learn out of a textbook. And it makes sense to me. Also, the indigenous worldview, or like the view on sharing the medicine, is that don't trust the people who don't drink their own medicine. So you need to actually drink a lot of ayahuasca to start to understand the ayahuasca better. Also, you have to go through a lot of those processes yourself to then, when other people go through a similar process, you can relate to them. Imagine if somebody's foundation is wiped out through ayahuasca and they're just like super confused after a ceremony. I can talk with them very confidently that, you know, I've been there and it was really necessary at that time in my process because my foundation was just messy and I needed a new one. And it's one part about that. The other one is also you need to do your own personal healing. How are you supposed to help somebody overcome their wounds if you are still totally messed up on the inside? So you need to go on that journey and drink a lot of ayahuasca, and step by step you're going to start understanding more. So I asked Sergio, so how do I help people? And he said, yeah, you don't help people. You watch and observe. And then he said, like, because if you want to help and then like the energy transfers over you, I have to help two people instead of just one person. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna like look and observe. And Also, interestingly, after maybe like 30 ceremonies, I felt like I had an idea how ayahuasca is, and then after 100, I said like, there's like so much I have no idea about. So it's like really, those teaching comes in waves as well. Then in the beginning journey, when people would vomit, I would give them like a spray that they can smell. So it's like, they don't have like that taste of vomit in their mouth. And then Sergio came to me like, hey, Oliver, don't do that. Like, I know you mean it in a good way, but the people after they vomit, they are in a very sensitive state and you don't want to interrupt them, even though what I did was coming from a good place. I want to share another experience that I want to like share like how it's like a little bit with working with ayahuasca. At one point, it was maybe like a year into my journey, a little bit more of working with the medicine, and I was like so strong. I was like, ooh, I like that stomach ache. I was like, ooh, like had a really hard time managing the ayahuasca for myself. And then Sergio came to me and gave me a tobacco and said like, hey, go smoke that tobacco to do like a cleaning to a person in a ceremony. And it's part of the tradition that we follow. I've seen it happen multiple times before, but I thought to myself as well, like, yeah, like blowing a little bit of smoke on that person is like, that's gonna help or what. And then I did it. And in that moment, I was very strong on the ayahuasca as well. I really had to like get my stuff together. But that's like the first time I really felt it. And that's the key. When you're like the strongest on the ayahuasca, on your path, that's when those messages, that's where the ayahuasca teaches you about how to work with these different plants. Also, I remember it was maybe about 8 months ago where I was talking with Sergio also about my path, about my, like where he sees me. And he says like, hey, Oliver, you're doing a great job, but you don't trust in your own abilities enough. There's like a level of doubt. When I first heard it, I was like, I don't know, like, what do you mean? Like, I feel like I'm a confident person, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't allow that feedback to come in. But then also meditating on it and thinking about that conversation, I realized that when I was helping people in the ceremony, I was hoping that, for example, the tobacco would help that person. Whereas if I do it now, I have a conviction and I know that it's helping that person. And even that little level of doubt is going to be difference in my aura, in my presence when helping that person. And that's going to be felt by the participant as well. You might have heard about the IKAROS before, which are very common in Peru. In Colombia, there's something similar. It's more called like Rezo Sagrado de Yahé, chants, whatever you want to call it. And it actually happened to me that last year in December, they first started to come to me. And I was very excited about that as well. And that's how it should be done as well. Like in the Ayahuasca Shaman courses, there is like a recording of it, and then you listen to the recordings, and then you say what you hear in the recordings. But that's, like, I feel like the authentic way to learn about ayahuasca. The messages have to come to you through the ayahuasca. And I was excited that it was happening, so I started to say them in the ceremonies. And then Sergio sat me down and said like, hey, Oliver, you're not ready to share those yet. And I was a bit, upset about it, because I was like feeling that the medicine wanted to develop in me and that my teacher wasn't supporting me in that process. But he said like, hey, in the way that you say those prayers, there's like that level of hesitancy. I just like can tell that you are not ready for it. And obviously I respected his guidance and his rules in that way, even though I didn't like it. And then a couple of months after, I realized that he was right and I wasn't ready to share them yet, and I'm still not doing it in a ceremony. So those are examples. Another one is, I'm improving a lot, and there are times where I feel like, hey, I'm getting closer and closer to be able to share ayahuasca. And just very recently, we had a ceremony Even like the night before, the ayahuasca hit me very strong. You know, I've been tired and everything. And then when it was time to share the second cup, I talked with individually with the people who were here who wanted to drink a second cup. There was one guy who did, but he hasn't vomited yet. So we recommended him to like start walking around a bit. That also induced the vomiting. And in those cases, we wait maybe 30 minutes to see if the ayahuasca activates, and then we share the second cup. And there were many other things going on in the ceremonies, in that ceremony, and then I just forgot about it. And then when the ceremony was about to end, and Sergio came to me and like, yeah, and that person, like, he did connect after he vomited, and I did share the second cup with him as well. And I was like, ooh, thank God, like, I forgot about it. And those are things that, you know, you cannot forget about, because it's a participant who's looking to connect with ayahuasca, and you can also not justify it as in like, hey, I was tired, I was feeling the medicine too strong or whatever, because if you decide that you're gonna host a ceremony that night, then you gotta do it till the end to the best of your abilities and doing all of your responsibilities independently if you're tired, if the medicine is strong, whatever. So those was another situation that usually I remember all of those things and am very composed in that manner, but there it slipped. And that's also another sign that I'm still not ready for it. And I think if, you know, there's a danger that if I would be living in Europe or the US and there would be people who are like, hey, I want to drink ayahuasca, then I could say like, hey, I've done hundreds of ceremonies at this point and I know how to help people in a ceremony. I can also do a ceremony. But that would come from a level of necessity. It would come from a level of ambition. And I might do a good ceremony in the majority of the cases, but there would still be those times where I would make mistakes. And mistakes is not something that you want to or can make in this process of sharing ayahuasca. So it's very important to remember that level of patience, that level of humility, and when the time is right, to then share the ayahuasca. And I think for me, it's going to be probably taking another 3 years till I'm there. Also, it's not like that, you know, once you have 500 ceremonies, you can share ayahuasca. In some people, it develops that way. In others, it doesn't. And, you know, everybody has their own path in life with ayahuasca as well. And this is not something that you can force. But then once I'm also ready to share ayahuasca, and you know, my teacher, the indigenous masters that I work with say like, yes, Oliver, you're ready, then I'm also gonna be able to do a great ceremony independently if I'm white or not. So those are, you know, a couple of perspectives on this journey. I also have a friend who's on this journey as well, and he went to Peru and he talked to the taxi driver about ayahuasca. And then the taxi driver said like, yeah, you know, when I am with some gringos and they want to do an ayahuasca ceremony, I tell them like, yeah, I'm also indigenous, I'm an ayahuasca shaman, I put on my poncho, put on some feathers, take them to the mountains and do a ceremony with them. And that's ridiculous and crazy. And that's also obviously where bad experiences happen as well. There are also indigenous who can share ayahuasca, who are qualified to share ayahuasca, who can do great ceremonies, but also have a problem with alcohol and they get drunk in a ceremony. And it sounds super weird and super strange for somebody like, what do you mean you drink alcohol in a ceremony or before the ceremony? But it happens, and it happens more frequently than you might think. So there's also that importance of not over romanticizing the indigenous in that sense. Obviously, they have a great level of knowledge around ayahuasca. I also remember talking to an indigenous about my ayahuasca journey, and he said like, yeah, you know, I know many indigenous who do amazing ceremonies. I also know many indigenous who do bad ceremonies. I know white people who do horrible ceremonies, and I know white people who do amazing ceremonies. So it's more about your level of dedication, your commitment to this path. And it takes multiple years, a lot of discipline, saying no to So many things, taking care of one's own energy, also bringing a level of harmony in one's life. Because if my life is a mess, then I cannot, then ayahuasca will show me that in my ceremony, and I won't be able to host the ceremony because there's many other things that are going on within me. So another big question remain is, how do you spot a good ayahuasca shaman? And one thing is, how many ceremonies are they doing? And the people who are going to those ceremonies, what is their experience like? Because, you know, I might hear about a shaman and how he does the ceremonies, and I might be like, oof, this is not how we do ayahuasca, and this is not the way it's supposed to be done, or whatever. But in the end, if the people who are going there are having powerful transformational experiences, they are well taken care of, that they don't have like negative consequences from the ayahuasca ceremonies, then it means that that person is doing something right. So I guess reputation, but even more the track record of that shaman is very important. Also, what I mentioned, obviously a shaman has to be either indigenous or indigenous trained and have had a teacher on this path who showed them how to share the ayahuasca as well. So not just somebody who got in their ayahuasca vision that they can do it. And I guess you can also go deep into the jungle, and some people have that romantic idea, and then I'll find this very old shaman who's like super authentic and it's like unique and everything, and you can do that, but it's just, there's a level of risk associated with it. What I would recommend is go to a reputable center, because for them it's very important that they do amazing ceremonies and that they have a responsible shaman who doesn't get drunk in a ceremony and all that kind of stuff. And those are the best starting points out there. And then eventually you're going to build your network, and you might go down to the jungle, and you're going to have better antennas if that person that you're talking to is just a taxi driver pretending to be an ayahuasca shaman, or if he can actually do an amazing ceremony.